Hello, welcome again to SiteGrinder One Hint at a Time, and I'm your host, Chris Perkins. In this video, we're going to be working on footers. Now, footers are done with the background and background color hint, so they're very similar to the hints we saw earlier when we did the browser background and the browser background color. So I'm going to look at those quickly just to refresh what we saw earlier. This is a browser background color layer. It's filling the full canvas and it's using the color overlay layer. The color that's chosen by the color overlay is the color that's going to be used to fill up the browser window no matter how large it is made. The background color hint is always used in conjunction with the color overlay layer effects. This is the browser background layer. It's using the pattern overlay. It could also use gradient overlay. It is always used, or usually used, with one of these two layer effects. And in this particular case, the browser background is touching the top of our canvas as well as the left and right sides, but not the bottom. And so SiteGrinder is going to repeat it horizontally. And so as the browser window is expanded, it'll always extend out to the left and the right, but it won't repeat vertically. We would like a similar sort of effect, whereas this browser background is providing the header for this particular document. We might want a similar sort of thing for the footer, and therefore we're just going to make a layer at the bottom of the canvas, and we're going to name it footer background color and use the color overlay on it to use the color. We could alternately name it footer background and use a pattern overlay or gradient overlay. So in this particular case, I'm just going to go the simplest route and just use the footer background color one. So I'm going to drag out a selection of, I would like the footer to be more or less there, and I'll just fill it with white just so it has some accent. And now it needs to use the color overlay layer effects. So I'll just use the color overlay, select that brown that we were using before, and name this layer footer background color. All right. Now, if we have a footer, any layers that are above the footer, Z order above the footer, meaning they're in its geographic area, are automatically included in the footer. I have made a couple layers earlier, and now we'll just make them visible. They're sitting in the area, in the boundary of the footer background color layer, and therefore they will be in the footer. I don't need to use any special hints on them or anything to have them be in the footer. They just have to appear in its area, and they'll be part of the footer. All right. Well, this document is nearly ready. There's one last thing when using footers. Every document that uses a footer, every page that wants to use a footer, also needs to have at least one column layer. I'm going to intentionally skip the column layer just so you can see what happens when you don't use a column layer, and then we'll fix it. But remember that if you want to use a footer, you also need to use a column layer, at least one, somewhere on your document, and which is why this video appears after the column videos that we did earlier. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to open up SiteGrinder here. I'm going to see a report, and sure enough, there's the error about the page as a footer, but no column. We'll just ignore that for now, and we're just going to go ahead and build this. So now SiteGrinder is outputting the graphics and the HTML and the CSS, and getting this page all created. It looks like it's done. Let's just go ahead and close the design manager just to make it a little easier to see. So now you can see the page has a footer. It follows the browser as I go up and down. I want to talk about this briefly. People have different ideas on what a footer is. Some people think, well, a footer is just that thing that comes after the content of the page. As far as SiteGrinder is concerned, the footer is something very specific. The footer is a pattern or color that extends the full width of the browser window, and it's always attached to it always is either attached to the bottom of the canvas or comes immediately after the content, whichever is lower. So that's a distinction from simply following the content. we'll see more examples of what people expect from another type of footer later, and how to achieve that without using the footer background color hints. Um, I'm now going to show what the problem is when you don't use a column. So when you don't use a column on your page, then when you are using a footer, then you get this, that the footer comes into the space of the document. So look at that, that's not really desirable. We don't want that. And so to avoid that, this page needs at least one column layer somewhere. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So I'm just going to come back here. By now, if you've been paying attention to the lessons, you have a pretty good idea of where a reasonable place to put the footer would be, the column will be, and I think we're just going to place it right about here. There we go. And remember, this layer will not actually be visible. Let's call this main column, and let's go ahead and build this and see what we get. Small warning, I'll ignore that. And building once again. And that's done. Let's close the design manager just to make it a little easier. And so now, when I come up, it does not pass into the area of the page. It's not simply using the column as a boundary. It has other calculations. The column makes the code of the page output a certain way, and with the relative positioning and that sort of stuff, that makes the footer actually work the way you expect. So the footer follows the bottom of the canvas until it hits the content, and then it simply follows the content. So like that. All right. Well, I hope this was a useful video, and we will have more to come.